Welcome to another unit in this Excel course. This time I'm going to talk about the different error codes Excel might show to you and, explain a little bit what he actually means by showing them to you. Well, the first thing to go with, which actually isn't really an error by itself, is just imagine you type in a relatively large number like this. Well, here it can be displayed because he shortens this in the scientific formulation. But if I format this to be a normal number, he automatically has to enlarge the cell. If I now shorten the cell again, I get this, let's call this type of error, which simply just means I cannot display this. This cell is too small for what you want to display. So whenever you see a lot of these hashtags, what you do is just extend, enlarge the cell so long until it can easily be displayed, or you use a different format of displaying this. So this is not really an error. The same thing goes for the next part, which is like an NA. NA just tells you there's no value available at the moment. So this is like just telling Excel, I don't know what this value will be at the moment, but maybe I know later on. So with these two comments beforehand, let's now consider the real problems. Well, the real problem, the first and major problem in mathematics is I want to divide by 0. So if I have something like 1 divided by, then I select this cell over here. Well, at the moment, this cell does not contain anything. So it's treated like 0 in this context if I divide by this. And he gives me the error, that's a division by 0. So you try to divide by 0, that's not possible. So here I need to check what, in this case, the C2 refers to, and then try to fill this with some kind of numbers. So here now it works. If I erase this again, get again the error. So in this case, division by 0 as an error can occur when either I actually really divide by 0, so if I have a number 0 here, or if I try to divide by a blank cell. And an error which is related to this, I can see if I try to do the same thing, for example, with the logarithm. If I try to apply the logarithm to a blank cell, we'll also get an error. Here, however, I get the numeral error. So here, this result, this number, could not be displayed. Because, logarithm not defined for negative numbers, so I get the same problem here as well. So it's similar to the division by 0, but this is if the function which I'm trying to use is not defined at this point. Here I have also the problem with the function 1 by x is not defined, but 1 by x is in Excel speak not a function, the way of calculation. So it's basically the same problem, but in a different context. Okay, so that's the two problems if I try to insert 0 into a function where it's not defined for 0. Then I can build a different problem. The problem which someone might have already gotten in earlier parts. If I start, equality sign, try to write down my function. And, here I'm using the English version. Maybe I've forgotten that I used the English version and I want to try calculating a sum. Write the German term Summe. Put this part here. He doesn't know a function of the name Summe. So he cannot actually calculate this. This was he tells you with, what's the name? What are you using here? I don't know this word. So whenever you see name, one of the names you use for functions, for formulas, one of the names you might use for cells is not recognized. So usually this means you either used a different language version or you made a short typo. So this can easily be fixed by just having a look here, what's the problem with this? And well, here we see something else as well. Whenever you get an error, you see here at this point, he tells you there is something wrong with what you entered here. I will just go do the same example here before. So in this case as well, here as well. So he says there actually is an error, and if I click on this symbol, I can, for example, take a look, what kind of error is this, and get additional help on this specific error. Well, if I go down here, you see, well, here it's only a number error. Here it's an invalid name. So the name I used for the function, for the cell reference, is not recognized. Okay, so that's the first few. Then we can build a different type of problem. Now imagine, again, I'm using the logarithm. Well, so that we don't get a problem, I write a number here, do the logarithm of this number, so everything works perfect. And then, for some reason, someone tries to enter some kind of text here. Well, obviously, the logarithm cannot be applied to text inputs. That's what he's telling us here. So whenever you get an error in value, this means that the input into the function isn't really of the format which was expected. So in this case, usually this means that you try to use some kind of text in a mathematical function, or something which was formatted as a text. This could also occur if, for example, you copy data from the internet, put this into your Excel file. He does not recognize this as data on a first glance, and whatever you want to calculate with this shows you a value error. This usually means you just have to translate what you entered into numbers, then all the rest will work fine as well. Okay, so this does not work. Well, let's stay with the same idea. We go with the logarithm here now of this value. We get the same number error as before. Well, to get rid of this, I'm just going to erase the whole column D. Well, at this point, he tries to refer to a column, to a cell, which no longer exists. That's what he's telling us here. You deleted something, so I have a problem with referencing to this specific cell. That's an invalid cell reference error. Well, that's already most of the problems you come across. There's one additional type of error which is in Excel, in my opinion, relatively rarely found, but well, let's have a look at this as well. Imagine you have a function where you use or have to use more than one cell, more than one command. For example, if you use the sum function, you need to enter at least, if you work with cells, 2 cells. So usually if you're lazy, you just go select them. So you see he automatically puts here the 2 points in between. Well, now what if you put this in by hand and instead of writing the 2 points, just do a blank here. And you get the so-called null error, or as he calls this, null error. This basically in the context of Excel means you want me to do something, but I don't have the slightest clue what I should do. So should I calculate the sum? We can do the same problem if I just go cell and cell. Should I add them, subtract them, multiply them? Excel simply does not know. So whenever he doesn't know what he should do because he's missing some kind of operator or separator or stuff like this, then he displays the null error. So the null error is a little bit different than if you get a null in the context of a different programming language. Here, this means the operator is missing. null error in other programming language you can, for example, get when a value is missing. You don't have a value for something specific. So this would be more like if I try to refer to a cell where there's nothing inside, well, I cannot actually evaluate the function because there is nothing to evaluate this with. So here, well, null in Excel context means there is some kind of operator missing. Many cases you only get this problem if you don't actually refer to this by clicking on this, selecting them, but by writing this by hand and, well, for some unknown reason, just using spaces or something which more or less doesn't make really sense. So because even if I go here with comma, I directly get, we cannot do this. This is a typo. So he directly sees this is a typo. Tries to correct the corresponding typo. So the null error I only get if I more or less on purpose do something wrong. And well, that already was all the different types of errors we might come across when working with Excel. And well, if you want to learn more about Excel, feel free to visit the rest of this course or have a look at the corresponding playlist. I say goodbye and see you next time.